Are you truly in control of your actions? Every decision you make, from what you eat for breakfast to how you respond to challenges in your life, are they really yours to choose? Or is there something else, perhaps beyond your conscious awareness, that shapes your choices? This is the question at the heart of one of the most enduring debates in both philosophy and psychology, the question of free will. Throughout history, thinkers from ancient philosophers to modern neuroscientists have grappled with this very issue. Are we free to act as we wish, or are our actions predetermined by our biology, our environment, or the past events that led to our present situation? Can we truly say I choose, or is there an invisible hand behind the scenes pulling the strings of our behavior? Today, we're going to take a journey through the complex terrain of free will. We'll explore the philosophical arguments that shape this debate, the psychological research that attempts to shed light on human behavior, and the neuroscience that might just offer answers. In the end, we may not find a simple answer, but perhaps we'll gain a deeper understanding of what it means to make a choice, and whether we're truly free in doing so. To start, we must understand the fundamental philosophical questions that form the foundation of this debate. The concept of free will is not only a psychological question but a philosophical one. Theories about free will have shaped how humans think about morality, responsibility, and even the nature of the self. Philosophers have been debating the concept of free will for centuries. In fact, this debate predates modern psychology by thousands of years. The central question is, can human beings make choices independently of external forces, or are we simply following a predetermined path? Let's explore three major philosophical perspectives on free will: determinism, libertarianism, and compatibilism. First, we have determinism. This is the idea that every event, including human actions, is caused by prior events. According to this view, the universe operates like a giant machine, where every choice we make is the result of a long chain of prior causes. Our actions, in this sense, are not truly free, they are inevitable, determined by everything that has come before. Determinism suggests that if we could know everything about the past, every atom, every environmental factor, and every influence on a person's life, we could predict the future actions of any individual. So, are we just puppets on a string? Do we simply act out the predetermined roles set for us by the laws of nature? On the other end of the spectrum, we have libertarianism. Libertarian philosophers argue that we do have free will, that we can make choices that are not determined by prior causes. According to this view, while external influences like biology and environment may guide us, they do not entirely control our actions. In fact, we have the ability to transcend these influences and make decisions that are genuinely free. Libertarians believe that we are the ultimate source of our actions. When we make a decision, it's not because our past determined it, but because we have the ability to choose otherwise, given the same circumstances. Then, there's compatibilism. This perspective seeks to reconcile free will and determinism. Compatibilists argue that free will doesn't require complete independence from causality. In other words, even if our actions are determined by prior causes, we can still be considered free as long as we act in accordance with our desires, intentions, and rationality. According to compatibilism, as long as we are not coerced or under external compulsion, we can still be said to act freely. Even if our choices are influenced by our past, we are still the authors of those decisions because they reflect our internal states, our thoughts, desires, and goals. Each of these perspectives has profound implications, not just for our understanding of human nature but for morality, ethics, and responsibility. If we are determined by forces outside our control, can we be held accountable for our actions? And if we have true free will, what does that mean for how we should treat others and ourselves? These philosophical ideas shape how we think about crime, punishment, and personal responsibility. If we believe in determinism, we might see criminals as victims of circumstance, deserving of rehabilitation rather than punishment. If we believe in libertarian free will, we might hold individuals fully accountable for their actions, believing that they could have chosen differently. Now that we've explored the philosophical foundations, let's turn to psychology. Psychologists approach the question of free will from a very different perspective. They focus less on abstract reasoning and more on how the brain works and how we actually make decisions. Psychological insights. Psychologists have been studying the concept of free will for decades, but they approach it through empirical research and experimentation. They want to understand how we make decisions and what factors influence those decisions. One of the key insights from psychology is that our sense of free will is often an illusion. Researchers have found that many of the decisions we think are made consciously are actually made unconsciously before we are even aware of them. This challenges the traditional view of free will as a conscious and deliberate process. For example, a study by neuroscientist Benjamin Libet in the 1980s suggested that the brain shows signs of preparing for an action several hundred milliseconds before we consciously decide to take that action. In other words, the brain may initiate a decision before we are even aware of it. Does this mean that our sense of free will is just a byproduct of unconscious brain processes? Psychologists also point out that our choices are influenced by cognitive biases, mental shortcuts that we use to make decisions more quickly. These biases can often lead us to make irrational or subconscious decisions without realizing it. For example, the confirmation bias causes us to seek out information that supports our existing beliefs, while the anchoring effect can cause us to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, even if it's irrelevant. These biases suggest that our choices are often not as free as we think they are. Instead, they may be shaped by automatic processes in the brain, the environment around us, and even the way we interpret information. Psychology also examines how personality traits like self-control and impulsivity impact our decision-making. People with higher self-control are more likely to make thoughtful, deliberate choices, while those with lower self-control might act impulsively. This variability in decision-making could suggest that while we may have some degree of freedom in our choices, our individual psychological makeup plays a significant role in shaping those choices. Now let's delve into neuroscience, the study of the brain, to explore what it reveals about free will. Brain research has shown us that much of our decision-making happens at the unconscious level, long before we become consciously aware of our intentions. Studies using brain imaging techniques, like fMRI, have demonstrated that brain activity related to a decision begins before we are consciously aware of making a choice. This raises the question: if our brain has already decided for us before we consciously choose, do we really have free will? The most famous experiment on this topic was conducted by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s. In his study, participants were asked to make simple decisions, such as whether to press a button with their right or left hand. While they made these decisions, their brain activity was measured using EEG, electroencephalogram. The results showed that brain activity indicating the decision to move occurred up to half a second before participants consciously reported making the decision. Libet's findings sparked a great deal of debate. Some interpreted this as evidence that free will is an illusion, while others argued that we still have the ability to veto or override unconscious decisions. In fact, Libet himself proposed the idea of a veto power, the ability of the conscious mind to stop an action initiated unconsciously. Another important aspect of how psychology views free will is through cognitive biases. These are systematic errors in thinking that affect our decision-making processes. Cognitive biases shape how we perceive the world and, consequently, how we make choices. For example, the framing effect occurs when the way information is presented affects our decision. If a doctor presents a treatment option as having a 90% survival rate, people are more likely to choose it than if the same option is framed as having a 10% mortality rate, even though the information is the same. Similarly, the status quo bias can lead us to stick with familiar choices, even when alternatives might be better. These biases, which often operate at an unconscious level, suggest that our decision-making is far from independent. These cognitive distortions may prevent us from making fully informed, rational choices. Instead of making free, deliberate decisions, our choices may be strongly influenced by subtle psychological mechanisms we are unaware of. Self-control is another psychological factor that plays a crucial role in free will. Self-control refers to the ability to resist short-term temptations in favor of long-term goals. People with high self-control tend to make better decisions and are less likely to give in to impulses. Psychologist Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow experiment in the 1960s tested self-control in children. Children were given the choice to eat one marshmallow immediately or wait 15 minutes for 2 marshmallows. The children who were able to wait tended to have better life outcomes later on, such as higher academic achievement and better health. This suggests that our ability to delay gratification and exert self-control can influence the decisions we make and the course of our lives. It challenges the idea that we are always free to choose, highlighting how psychological traits, like self-control, shape the way we exercise our free will. So, do we have free will? The answer may depend on how we define it. Philosophically, there's no clear consensus. Some argue that we are determined by external forces, while others insist that we are free agents. Psychologically, research suggests that our choices are often influenced by unconscious processes, cognitive biases, and personality traits. Neuroscience shows that our brain often decides for us before we are even aware of it. Ultimately, while we may not have total, unrestricted freedom in our choices, it seems that we still play a role in shaping our actions. Free will, it seems, is a complex and multifaceted concept, shaped by a combination of conscious and unconscious processes, individual traits, and external influences. Whether or not we are truly free in our decisions, the exploration of free will offers fascinating insights into human behavior and the nature of choice.